Hello, BookTube. Just the other day, I did a quick video about a few works of historical fiction that I really liked. A lot of them I've talked about on this channel before. I've talked about a lot of books on this channel before. I thought I would just make a quick list. I think I did it in response to a video by someone else. I don't need much in the way of a prompting to do that, but when I made that video, that was about 10 or 11 books. A great many of you asked if I could do 50. If I could do a list of 50 books. And of course I can. So I started brainstorming about what those would be, and I've made a longer list for you of 50 or so. A master list of historical fiction that is really good. I want to talk a little about historical fiction before we get to the list itself. Like, for instance, in that earlier video, I described the parameters of what I was using to describe historical fiction. Like, number one, the events in the book must be history to the author. In the historical novel review, when I used to work for them, our guideline was that more than 50% of the book should take place more than 50 years ago. But whether or not we use a number, the author should not personally remember the events. So, for instance, Thomas Mallon writing about Reagan is going to be classified as historical fiction, sure, but it's not going to make it. Nothing like that's going to make it onto this list. And then the second thing, the second qualification that I used here is that the history element of historical fiction has to be the point. It can't be just an exotic gimmick, which means that a lot of historical romance, almost all historical murder mysteries, are out because the point there isn't the history. If you know what I mean, the point is, a lot of you seem to agree with a lot of these parameters. That's why I'm repeating them. A third parameter would be that the history must be the only setting of the book. So dual time frame novels are incredibly popular, and of course they are all, in a broader sense, historical fiction. But they won't work for this. It can't be that someone in 2025 is discovering a MacGuffin from 1825, because that means that the history is not the only point of the book. And maybe one other parameter, maybe a little bit more argumentative here, but I'll do it just so that we can get it out of the way. Is that the history has to be history. So you can't. I'm disqualifying novels that are set around myth. Whether it's Greek myth, so for instance, although everyone in the world, and I also would qualify Mary Renault's novel, The King Must Die, as historical fiction, it's not based on enough. It's based largely on mythology. She is euhemerizing. She's trying to make Theseus into an actual person and trying to figure out what that would be like. But Theseus never was an actual person, so you're building it on nothing at all. And the closest I'm coming to violating that in this list, as I did in the last list, would be the figure of King Arthur. And I'm allowing that because it's extremely likely that some form of King Arthur existed somewhere in the historical record. So I'm kind of allowing that. And so those are the rough parameters of what we're talking about. And then there's also, we should also keep in mind the varying aims of historical fiction, because not everything on the list I'm going to give you is built the same, if you know what I mean. Plenty of historical fiction, works of historical fiction, simply want to immerse you in the past. They do have a plot. All of them have a plot. But they mainly want to immerse you in the past. They want to make you feel like you're living in a completely different era, which accounts a lot of the times for how long they are. Whereas others have a pointed story to tell that completely depends on the historical setting, but doesn't want to immerse you. Or not only immerse you, or not even mainly immerse you. So we'll get those out of the way. We'll go down this list here. I'll give you a tiny little thing. Obviously, with this many books, I can't go on at length about each book. I could. I've written about a great number of these books, but we'll start with one that has, I think, fallen out of favor. This was once upon a time a massive bestseller. That will be true of a lot of books on this list. This is Samuel Shellabarger, and this is the book Prince of Foxes. I just noticed that I pulled all these covers off the internet. That's another drama for this video, is the covers. Believe you me, you'll get some venting on that subject. This is not a bad cover, and of course anything that Jonathan Yardley likes must be good. But this is a story of the Italian Renaissance, and a thing about novels, historical novels set in the Italian Renaissance, is that often they feature, more often than most other stories, they feature a waif who comes from nothing and rises to the peak of the greasy pole. In this case, the court of Cesare Borgia and the Borgia world, just in general. All the Borgias make their appearances here, of course, and it's good. It's good sudsy stuff. And then we have something. A lot of the some of the books that are on this list will have been from the earlier list. I'm not going to exclude them. They're still good. They haven't gotten bad in the course of a month. This is Rose Tremaine's book, Restoration. Again, about a character who climbs a greasy pole. This case in Restoration London. And the character that we have here reaches the pinnacle and then falls. And that is the main drama of this book, is him trying to claw himself back to the world that he has lost. In other words, the pun on the word restoration. Very, very good. Best thing Rose Tremaine ever wrote. Then we have Lucia St. Clair Robson. She has written a number of books that could have been on this list. I believe I only have one, and it's The Tokaido Road. This lovely cover here. I believe I had this trade paperback once upon a time. This is a very much an immersive thing. And it is basically the story of a young lady whose father is lost to her, and she needs to travel along the famous Tokaido Road. At first, at the beginning of the story, she has what she thinks is a hired protector. She meets a whole bunch of people along the way. It is basically a gigantic, opulent road novel. And there is a character in here. Well, all the characters are well drawn in here, but there's a character in here who will have you weak in the knees. And you might think, so Robson has drawn a female character who is really meant to allure to her male readers. And some of you might think, so Robson has drawn a male character who's really meant to appeal to her female readers. Nope. Nope, she's drawn a male character who will make all of you weak in the knees. She's just that good at it. Then we have... this is from a long, long time ago. There is a much better cover to this book. There was a mass market paperback with green edges to the pages, but I couldn't find that. This is The Female by Paul Wellman, and the only thing this is from the hardcover, the original hardcover dust jacket here in the U.S. And the only thing this one shows you is Constantinople, is Istanbul. But the female in question here is the Empress Theodora. And this is a big, wonderful novel about her and her world. She was, in actual real life, a waif who rises from nothing to the peaks of power. And that story has been irresistible to historical novelists all along. I could have added 10 more about Theodora. This is my favorite. It creaks a little. It's opulent in the way of a book from a century ago, but it's still wonderful. Pretty sure it's out of print. Would love to find that old mass market paperback, or at least a cover that I could show you. If you don't know anything about the Empress Theodora, if you read just an account of her on Wikipedia, and you don't know anything about, never heard of her before, you will think you're reading the account of a novel. But you're not. Although she gets exaggerated. We have her more exaggerated stories only through the pen of someone who hated her. So a lot of the stories about her, you should take them with a pinch of salt. But they make great stories anyway. Then we have Robert Louis Stevenson. This is his book, The Black Arrow. A wonderful novel set during the Wars of the Roses in England. It's sharp. It's adventuresome, of course, like all of Stevenson. It also... there's an element of Stevenson that not everybody catches in all of his work, which is how much fun he's having writing the book. Even when his character's having a miserable time, he's still having fun. And sometimes he simply can't repress that, even in a dramatic scene. There's one particular scene from Treasure Island I think you'll all remember when I point that out, but maybe you didn't think of it that way. And there are plenty of scenes like that in The Black Arrow, which is a serious novel about a serious subject, a serious trial for the main character. But Stevenson is having such a great time that this will be a lot of fun for you to read. Okay, then we have something that's not a lot of fun. This is William Vollmann. William Vollmann has wrote half a shelf of historical fiction. This one I think is my favorite. I think it's the most eloquent. I also think it's the most accessible to a reader who's never read Vollmann and doesn't know anything about the subject. This is his huge book, The Dying Grass, of the Nez Perce War, where you would expect, this is a novel about tribe of Native Americans, a particular people of Native Americans who are hunted ruthlessly by the military. And they had a heroic leader, a charismatic heroic leader. And you would think the one other novel that I know of that was ever written on this subject stars that guy, and everybody else is a villain. Here, Volman, among many other things that he does wonderfully in this book, puts a lot of narrative focus on the leader of the military, of the U.S. military, that is doing the chasing. Not necessarily meaning to make you sympathize. It's huge. It's a gigantic, sprawling novel, but boy, oh boy. It is stylistically daring in a way that a lot of books on this list are not. Historical fiction tends not to be stylistically daring. There are only a couple of examples here. It's stylistically daring. It's beautiful. It has gorgeous moments cut out of nowhere. Then we have something by Walter Edmonds. I'm sorry about the cover. I looked for a good cover, but after a while of putting these books together, I realized I will be worn out psychologically if I'm spending an hour per book trying to find a good cover like the kind I know the book has had in its print history. So I just started taking whatever cover I could find. I did that for most of these. And the covers aren't important. After all, it's what's inside that's important. This is Walter Edmonds' book, Drums Along the Mohawk, which has an ant colony on the cover, I think. Or those might be people on horses. I don't know. This is about, at heart, at the beginning of this book, it's about a couple that tries to tame the wildness of the Mohawk Valley, a particular part of the United States in colonial times that was pretty fierce. It was pretty fierce. This is an older book. It, of course, like a lot of the books in this list, it will be a little bit dated. After all, when we think about it, that young couple and every other person in this book is trying to tame the Mohawk Valley from the people who are living there, which is not quite as black and white now as it was when this book was written. Still an amazing adventure story. Then we have something by John Mortimer, who became famous as the creator of Rumpole of the Bailey. I've shown you this book before. I think a lot of these books were from that earlier list. This is his novel, Will Shakespeare, which was a companion to a TV miniseries about the life of William Shakespeare. And believe it or not, that is Tim Curry on the cover. That is Tim Curry, and please, please, please don't ever hold your sword that way. It's okay if you want to hold a foam rubber Hollywood sword that way, but don't hold your own sword that way. It's a good way to lop your fingers off. This is a slight little thing. It's a really good, knowing piece of historical fiction. John Mortimer is a terrific writer. I venerate him, of course, for Rumpole of the Bailey, but he actually wrote, not this novel, this is a good piece of historical fiction, but he also wrote a so-called State of England novel, a contemporary fiction novel, no cracking jokes, no Rumpole, no nothing, that I think is one of the great novels of the 20th century. And his Will Shakespeare book is one of the best pieces of Shakespeare historical fiction. I won't enrage the traditionalist among you by saying that writing a novel of William Shakespeare is just about as much historical reconstruction as writing a novel about King Arthur. I won't do that, even though that is true. There are some wonderful, wonderful lines and scenes in here, just fantastic. And the narrator of the book does not shy away from the more contested subjects in Shakespeare's life, like, for instance, him and the Earl of Southampton. At one point in the novel, the narrator simply, in a dignified way, simply says, well, you know, I've heard all sorts of rumors, and you can ask me, and I was there, and I might know, and for all I think they slept with each other as man sleeps with woman, and I don't care, and you shouldn't either. That's really neat. Then we have something by Elodie Harper. This is the first in a series. A number of examples on this book will be a whole series. I recommend the whole series, but I'll mention just one book just to get us off. This is The Wolf Den, and this is a sort of novel set in the Roman Empire, set in Pompeii, in a whorehouse, giving us the lives of the women who live and work there. And it takes most of the paradigms of ancient Roman historical fiction and just turns them completely on their head. Effectively so. Very effectively so. Also takes a little paradigm of Roman historical fiction and kind of, sort of, at least temporarily turns that on its head as well, because the unspoken rule of any historical novel set in Pompeii is well, you know how it's going to end, and that's not true in the Wolf Den. So I won't talk about the broader series, but still, it's well worth your time to read. Then we have something that may be a little bit wavery. Maybe we'll see. This is The Spire by William Golding, and this is about a church figure wanting to add a spire to a church, and the work that goes into that, and the lobbying that goes into that, and whatnot. And the reason that I'm a little wavery on this is because I'm not sure 100% how many time frames this book takes place in. I think it's supposed to be a parable. God help us all. But it's really good, and it comes close enough, so I thought I would add it on here just to recommend it to you. Then we have something that a lot of you will know through the movie. There was a movie. This is Shusaku Endo's book, Silence, about some missionaries who go to Japan in the Middle Ages to convert, in medieval times, to convert the heathen, and suffer horribly for it. Suffer death, but also horrible deaths. Offhand, gruesome, torturous deaths. That struggle, which definitely took place, it is front and center, although you don't remember it. Most people don't remember it. It's front and center in another medieval Japan novel that is on this list. It's just a lot of other stuff is going on in that book, so you don't concentrate on it, but it was a big deal. These missionaries were a big deal. And I'm not 100% sure what Shusaku Endo is doing in this book. I love it. I love it for its tensile grace. But I'm not... Well, you have to read it for yourself and see. It's not long. But I'm not sure that his goal is to immerse you. Definitely his goal is not to immerse you. So his goal must then be to poke at you, to do something pointed, but I'm not sure what that is. Then we have Kenneth Roberts. This is his book, Northwest Passage. I'm sorry about the cover. The one, I know there's a great cover for this. I think there's a cover for this that is a Wyeth painting, for God's sake, but I couldn't find it, and I wasn't willing to spend an hour on each book. This is an absolutely terrific frontier colonial America novel, big and atmospheric. I would once upon a time have said unfilmable, but I believe it could be filmed. No good attempt has ever been done. But Roberts is lost. He is lost to modern readers, and he shouldn't be. He's really, really good. Then we have something by Geraldine Brooks. This is Year of Wonders. I think this was on my last list. This is a slim, very slim novel of hers. A rare. Historical fiction isn't always slim. So one of the reasons why a lot of people find it intimidating. But this is about the Black Death. This is about the plague that killed 2/3 of some parts of Europe. That's why you have that cover. That mask on the cover was that's a stylized variation of the mask and the hat and the gear that doctors used to use walking around in plague zones. This is what happens when the plague comes to one little village. And we know from the historical record, beyond any doubt at all, that plenty of little villages were wiped out completely. 100% mortality. So that no one in that village lived. And what we know from the historical record, people at the time very much knew and suspected. So when the plague started to sweep through a street in your 2-street town, you started to have apocalyptic thoughts. It's so wonderfully, gracefully done. Then we have something, sorry about the cover, this is R.D. Blackmore, this is Lorna Doone. Big historical novel set in Exmoor centuries ago, in which there is a bloody-minded clan who knows exactly what they want and what they don't want, and what happens if an outsider wants to fall in love into that clan. But there's so much else going on between that clan and the government, between that clan and other clans. This is a little bit creaky to the modern sensibilities. There are a few books on this list that are, but I think it's still well worth it. I really do. Once Lorna Doone picks up steam for you, boy, oh boy, does it work. Why am I getting... Let's try that. See if that helps any. I'm trying to navigate the sun and the bean and you. It's not easy. Not easy being a booktuber. I think we've covered that. Then this next one is by an author going by the name of Luther Blissett. That is a number of authors, and they wrote a big historical novel called Q, which is about the Protestant Reformation. This is the great novel of the Protestant Reformation. The people but also the ideas that usually in historical fiction set around the time of Luther or the break with Rome, the ideas are usually given short shrift. In the 20th century especially, that was endemic after Vatican II, when people started thinking, well, we don't take organized religion seriously, and therefore no one ever did. But trust me, if you'd gone back in time and managed to talk to Henry VIII about his break with Rome, I wouldn't advise that, but if you did, he would go on for hours on questions of doctrine. Hours. The ordinary man in the street a well-read man, a literate man on the street, could go on for hours about doctrine. And that is not slighted in this book. There is still a plot. There is an actual, a kind of a gimmicky, page-turning plot in here. But the whole atmosphere of the Protestant Reformation is captured wonderfully. Then we have something by Paul Kingsnorth. I've recommended this book before. This is a novel of what happens when aliens invade the world. So aliens come to your world, they have superior technology, they have superior numbers, they are completely incomprehensible to you, and they lay waste to your world and leave it in fragments, and you are creeping around in the rubble. Only in the wake, that alien invasion is the Norman invasion, and the world that comes after it. And you still get the disorientation, and that is the masterstroke of this book, one of two. The other masterstroke of this book is to create disorientation in you by writing the whole thing in its own patois that you have to learn as you go along. It's not like there's a stranger who confronts the patois along with you, like is going to happen in a later book in this list. Rather, you have to just figure it out on your own. You have to figure out the language of the book while you are reading the story of the people involved. And it is marvelous. It is marvelous the way that works. It will not daunt you. I feel sure of that. It will not daunt you. Then we have something by Charles Portis that Charles Portis would have puked if he saw. I don't know what explains why we have covers like this. This is True Grit. His novel True Grit. I've never seen this edition, thank God. I don't want to see this edition. Why on earth we think this is acceptable, I have no idea. When we had this, I don't know. But it's not the last time we're going to see something like this. This has an afterword by Donna Tartt that if you want to cut down on dead tree weight for this book, and you have a paperback copy of this, you can simply page to where her afterword begins, grab the book by the spine, and tear that whole section out and throw it away unread. It's shock value to have Donna Tartt do an afterword for True Grit. But this is a story not only about the West, the old American West, but also the death of the old American West, and it might also blur my conditions at the beginning. But it's too good not to recommend. Then we have something by John Williams. This is Augustus, a Roman historical novel by the author of, say it with me now, Stoner. Yep. And the only reason I'm recommending this because it's really, really good. It's probably the best novel that has the Roman Emperor Augustus as its centerpiece. The author is a lot more comfortable in this world. He is comfortable writing about the world of Augustus, and it shows in his drastically overrated piece of crap novel Stoner, because in both cases women are the property of the men around them, and are hardly in the picture at all. So good. But as far as Roman historical fiction goes, there are quite a few examples on this list, and this is the New York Review of Books reprint, and it is wonderful. Not as fully researched as you could do for historical fiction about Augustus. We know a lot about this time period, but still, wonderfully done. Shows what could have been if Stoner had been a book that was less whiny and self-indulgent, keeping in mind, when it comes to Stoner and all the people who like it, Steve's dictum, that in men there is no uglier or less attractive quality than self-pity. In fiction or in real life, if you find a book that mirrors your incredible eye-level self-pity, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. That doesn't make that a good book. That means you're self-pitying yourself too much. Anyway, let me move on. We have next Barry Unsworth. Another slim historical novel. This is Morality Play, about a roving troupe of actors in the 14th century. And what they encounter. They are putting on their morality plays wherever they can get their room and board, maybe a few coins. When they get to a village and encounter a mystery, Barry Unsworth is good at this. He can be bad. Oh, can he be bad? But he's not bad. This is his best book. You would think that I would think his best book was his fictional retelling of the Trojan War, but no. No. Morality Play is terrific. Then we have something with Pauline Gedge. Again, I looked for the great cover to the mass market paperback that I have, and could not find a visual representation of it online. And it would have taken, I'm sure I could have found it if I went an hour and trolled through old blogs of people, but I didn't want to do an hour for each book. This is Child of the Morning. We can just forget all of these new forwards. We can just forget all of them. We pretend they don't exist. This is a big, luscious novel about Queen Hatshepsut, the first female pharaoh, or the first high-profile female pharaoh. Pauline Gedge did a lot of research for this thing. A lot of it is dumped onto the page, but she handles that fairly well. That is an endemic danger of historical fiction, is that the author will spend a year researching the subject, and when they're finished with that year, they will realize, okay, well, there's one dramatic through line here that I obviously want to pursue. I've written 10 novels before now. They were all set in the present day. Now I'm doing historical fiction because it can really sell. But even so, I can't abandon my novelist instincts, and I can look at all this research and see the story I should tell. But the story I should tell is slender. And I didn't go through all that year of researching just to dump a slender story on the page, so I'm going to dump it all on the page. That is an endemic risk that you run with historical fiction. Some authors will do it, and they just are punishing you with it. Other authors will do it. They shouldn't. No author should do it. But if they're going to do it, they should make it wonderful. And Pauline Gedge does. So the whole world of ancient Egypt is here. Then we have another Kenneth Roberts. A couple of authors appear twice on this list. This is his book, Rabble in Arms, about the American Revolution, about the tensions rising in the New England colonies. It is terrific. It is character-driven. It's big and solid. It's solid in that it has narrative periods that writers really don't do anymore. They really don't do them anymore. This was written for an audience that maybe had a radio in the home, but probably not a television, and definitely not the internet. This was written, in other words, for an audience 2 generations ago that knew how to settle down and pay attention, and was able to do that. If you can somehow claw back your ability to do that, Kenneth Roberts is going to be an author you're going to be very glad to discover. Him and a whole bunch of other people on this list. Then we have something I mentioned. You can, with historical fiction, you can either immerse or you can have a pointed story to tell. This is very much a pointed story, maybe the most pointed story on the list. This is David Benioff, and we will try not to hold against him Game of Thrones. You must not curse his name. He has done other things. And this is his book, City of Thieves, where 2 prisoners of war in World War II are told, well, you can be shot or you can go on a mission. And the mission in this, war-torn Leningrad is to find a dozen eggs. Not an easy thing to do in a city where people are eating rats and boiling grass. And they set about doing that in the course of, fewer than 200 pages. And it's wonderful. Just wonderful. It reminds you what Benioff can do when he's telling a story well, as opposed to when he's telling a story not only poorly, but as poorly as history records. Anyway, the next one is J.G. Farrell. Again, we can ignore all modern introductions and just read the book. This is a New York Review of Books reprint of his book, The Siege of Krishnapur. And it is, there aren't many Indian historical fiction on the list. This is about the Great Mutiny. And there have been other novels about the Great Mutiny and other big sprawling novels, including another one on this list in which the Great Mutiny appears. But this is the great evocation of that event. It's also the great evocation, including nonfiction. The Great Mutiny has been the subject of many, many targeted histories, nowhere near as effective as this. Nothing is as effective as this. J.G. Farrell is better known for another book, but this is wonderful. I was very glad that it was reprinted. Then we have Peter Carey's novel, The True History of the Kelly Game, where Ned Kelly tells his own story. The infamous Ned Kelly tells his own story. I'm not a fan of Peter Carey. I like almost nothing that he's written. I know that he has ardent fans. I'm just not one of them. The register that he uses just does not work for me. To me, his register in his fiction seems to start with the assumption that you know who he is and you already love him. I could be wrong about that, but I hate that register. When I see it, I hate it. And that's largely absent from this book, mainly because Ned Kelly takes it over. His conception of Ned Kelly takes over the book. And Ned Kelly didn't think that way about himself, although he had much better grounds to do so than Peter Carey. And as a result, you get just a terrific story with a heartbreaking betrayal. I mean, fiction is full of one character betraying the other, and you're ready for it. You steel yourself for it, but anyway, this next one is I'm showing you a book, but it is a series. It's by Andrew Levkoff, and the first book is The Other Alexander. This is the Bow of Heaven series about when we meet him, a young man named Alexander. But really, these novels are about they're Roman historical fiction about Crassus, Marcus Licinius Crassus. Who you might, if you don't know Roman history, you might vaguely remember his name as being part of some triumvirate or other. He was a Roman plutocrat, an incredibly rich man, someone who could buy and field his own armies, and who had a celebrated end. He met his end in the East, and his severed head was used as a prop in a play. But I mean, there are other things going on in these novels, and I don't want to speak for the author, who's a heck of a nice guy, but in the course of these novels, Andrew Levkoff is slowly, by stages, giving us a Crassus who is three-dimensional and at least intensely identifiably human, if not a good guy. And it is amazing that you could do that. This is actually, in many important ways, a precursor to the Wolf Hall books, which do that same thing with Thomas Cromwell. We know enough, historically, about Crassus to know that he was a gigantic piece of crap, who well deserved the grisly end that he got. We know enough from history to know that, just like we know the same thing about Thomas Cromwell. But when it's done this effectively, this wonderfully, you're almost willing to believe it. Then we have, this book has also had a good cover, but not its original cover. Its original cover is even more boring than this one. This is Julian by Gore Vidal. The original cover for this book was just black. It's just a black dust jacket. And this is a historical novel about Julian the Apostate, a late Roman emperor who had the quixotic idea to return the empire to the worship of pagan gods. That was never going to work. And he was a weird, quirky intellectual, a quasi-intellectual, a weird, odd figure. No one liked him in his own time, and yet people worshipped him in his own time. He had pretensions of military glory, and that did him in. There's a lot about him. We have two really good accounts. They aren't either one of them completely reliable on their own, but if you play them off against each other, you can get a pretty good portrait of this figure. And for this book, this was a very early success for Gore Vidal. He did all the research. His later books, not so much. But this, yes. And also, in this earlier book, before rampant, lifelong alcoholism eroded his ability to use the English language. Authors, or people with pretensions to be authors, always think that that's the only thing that alcohol won't erode. That alcohol is my friend. Everybody knows that. All writers drink. So the one thing that won't go away, sure, I'll pee my pants. Sure, I'll lose all my relatives. Sure, I'll lose all my money. Sure, I will know relatively early on, well by age 45, that my liver is cirrhosing. But my writing will stay because that's the muse. No, the writing's the first thing to go. It's the first thing to go. And it went in Vidal. I don't want to argue with his fanboys, but I think it's easily traceable. But in Julian, that hadn't happened yet. And so it's as tense and good as historical fiction gets from this author. And then we have, this next one is a book that very much wants to immerse you. It does have a plot. I'm trying hard to remember what that plot is because this is so bent on immersing you. This is by Eleanor Cooney and Daniel Altieri, and this is The Court of the Lion, a 1,000-page thing about the Tang dynasty that is wonderful, full of sunrises and the texture of curtains and the nature of rain on the patio. And oh my, there's so many scenes in here, and all the scenes that you're going to remember from this book have nothing to do with the nominal plot. It's just the way it is. Some historical fiction just wants to immerse you and does a really good job, and we shouldn't fault it for that. That is a very valid writing goal. And The Court of Lion does that. Big thing, big undertaking. Like a few of the books on this list. A few of the books on this list are 1,000 pages. Then we have something that has such a tangy contemporary feel to it that it often doesn't get grouped with historical fiction, but it definitely is. The author was a whippersnapper. He didn't remember the time period he was writing about. This is The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay, which is Michael Chabon's evocation of the early 20th century New York City that gave rise to not only the genius of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, but in a more guarded, slightly more distant way, the genius of Siegel and Schuster, the creators of Superman. And the whole superhero craze, the whole craze for another level to pulp adventure stories. This is jam-packed fiction. This author, believe it or not, this is a jam-packed novel, and you'll see what I mean when you start to read it. There is no paragliding anywhere. Every sentence is doing three things. It's jam-packed muscular prose in that way, and believe it or not, it's not as muscular prose as this author gets. I know that this author is known for this book, and I think he knows that by now. He's not a young man anymore. I think he knows by now that he will be remembered for this book. I myself think that by far the best thing he ever did was the Yiddish Policeman's Union, which is even more muscular than this. But this is historical fiction, and it will enchant you, I believe. And if it does, consider making Michael Chabon one of your authors. Consider reading everything. He's actually never written anything bad. Most of what he's done has been really good. Okay, this next one, I have no idea. I just pulled this off the internet. This cover doesn't even have the author's name on it. This is Captain Blood by Raphael Sabatini. And this is very much swashbuckling adventure. And Sabatini had a hit with this, and there was a movie. I've actually written about the book and the movie. And there were sequels. And Captain Blood is a swashbuckling, sword-wielding buccaneer, and it is fantastic stuff. Just fantastic. It is as shallow as a pie crust, but it is fantastic stuff. just a one action-packed adventure chapter after another. Much in the way of Stevenson. Not as good, of course, but still really good. Again, this next one, I don't know what to say about the covers. I would have looked for good covers. Every one of these books has had a good cover. But I didn't want to spend an hour on each book. This is The Last of the Wine by Mary Renault. This is a historical novel of hers about Greece on the edge of invasion, and a love that develops between a young man just coming of age and an older man. Not an old man, but an older man. Still gorgeous, still physically attractive, but not in his 20s anymore, or in his late 20s. This novel is about them going to war. It's about their families being ruined. It's about their country being on the edge of devastation. It's about all of the characters who were in the streets of Athens at the time, including Socrates. And it's also, a large element of this book is also Mary Renault dramatizing the social pattern of the upper 1% in ancient Greece at the time, which was homosexual. Which was that older man would take a younger man, a gorgeous younger man, under his wing. The gorgeous younger man could not be poor, had to be from the same socioeconomic class. And the fact that the older man took that younger man under his wing and taught him society and squired him and wrote poems to him and probably had sex with him, didn't affect the older man's position as a married father at all. It was just a part of Greek society for the well-to-do, that this pattern took place, that when you were a young man, it wouldn't be your father or your uncles, most of whom, let's face it, might be dead. It wouldn't be them who would shepherd you into the ways of society. How do you comport yourself? How do you dress? How do you behave when you're in your cups? How do you behave at the gymnasium? How do you do this so as not to make a laughingstock of yourself? How do you behave? it wasn't your fathers or your uncles who would do that. It was this older man who would do that. And you would be seen as more or less his special friend. It's a pattern that's long gone from the world, but it was a big part of the narrative reason to dramatize this book. Although a lot of other stuff happens, a lot of the historical stuff happens. Again, I have no idea about the cover here. We're just gonna press ahead. This is another example where the book is part of a long series, and I'm not giving you the whole series. This is Sharpe's Rifles by Bernard Cornwell. And for some reason, there's a 90-year-old man on the cover. And once again, I want to stress, do not hold your sword that way. You will cut your fingers off. If the sword is well maintained, you will cut your fingers off. That is just the way couch potato artists think look dramatic. And this is set in the Napoleonic era, in the England versus Napoleon. And this is set on the land, which made it a rarity. It was a very popular thing, thanks to Horatio Hornblower, to set all of these England versus Napoleon books at sea. And this is set on land. We follow Richard Sharpe as he goes through his various adventures. He's a young man, a dashing man. No idea about this cover here. And it goes on. The series goes on and on. It is, in fact, still ongoing. It might be the only book on this list where it is still ongoing. And it's well worth it. The whole series is well worth it. It's very long, but it's well worth it. Then we have E.L. Doctorow. You would think if I have E.L. Doctorow on a list of historical fiction, it will be for ragtime, but no, I calls them like I sees them, and I think Billy Bathgate is a better book. About a young street urchin who falls in with Dutch Schultz's gang and learns all about the way they do their business. Doctor and I have a complicated history. We, to put it mildly, don't see eye to eye. But when he's right, he's really right. And I think this book is his best thing. All the way to the end. The end, I think, is meant, I don't know this for sure, I've never had it from the author's mouth, but I think the end of the book is meant as a kind of touching tribute to the end of Brideshead Revisited, of all things. But it's wonderful and brutal. Then we have something by Matthew Keneally. This is his book, English Passengers, where in the middle of the 19th century, a ship is impounded, and the only way it can get free is to be rented. And it is rented by two very different men who have two very weird agendas going on that they are only partially revealing to the captain or the crew or to each other. So it's a wild ride. No pun intended. It's a wild voyage with these two, trying to figure out what their various weird dreams are going to make them do in the course of this novel. It's terrific stuff. Really terrific stuff. It's not anywhere near as deep as its defenders say it is, I think. But it's terrific stuff. Then we have a book that will need no introduction, although all the people know the title, but very few people have read the book. This is by Nordhoff and Hall, and it is Mutiny on the Bounty, about the mutiny against Captain Bligh by Fletcher Christian and his men. And that, of course, is a great story. Bligh wrote the story. Plenty of other people wrote the story. But this is its best realization in fictional form, to the point where, as happens in historical fiction, sometimes somebody will nail it so well that you really feel like a quieting is on the waters and no one is ever going to write about it again in fiction. When will we next see a major novel about Thomas Cromwell, for instance, to use a high-profile recent example? This feels like one of those. It's terrific. Its sequels are also terrific, but they're not as good as Mutiny on the Bounty. Then we have something, again, Stance's first book in a series. You should read the whole thing. This is the Niccolo books of Dorothy Dunnett. Niccolo Rising is the first one, and much like Prince of Foxes, this is about a waif who rises from the depths, rises up the greasy pole, becomes a name and a power in the Italian Renaissance. Which is, of course, marvelously evoked because Dorothy Dunnett uses lots and lots of books to do it. This is a big, long series. Now, I believe with this, or with the Lyman Chronicles, also by this author, that only one book will be enough to hook you so that you're on for all of the books. I've never known anyone to read the first book in either the Lyman Chronicles or this series and not be hooked for the long run. Dorothy Dunnett is writing for adults. She's very much writing for you to pay attention. But her series are long, so you look at them and think, oh, well, I'm never going to commit to all that. But you do. You end up doing it because she's just so good. Then we have... I believe this is another author who is twice on this list. This is, again, medieval Japan fiction. This is Taiko by Eiji Yoshikawa. And it's big and sprawling. It takes place between rival clans. It has lots and lots of bloodshed, lots and lots of military action. Very little in the way of fully fleshed out human beings, but you won't mind. It's a big thing. I really wish, with this and the other book by this author I'm going to mention, I really wish that there were a big, nice, fat, conventionally sized trade paperback. Deckled edges and French flaps. I would love that. That, as far as I know, has never been done. Tycho, as far as I know, in the United States, only exists as a weirdly oversized hardcover that is incredibly uncomfortable to read and carry around. Anyway, it's big and sprawling. It's really, really good. I would call it a thinking man's Shogun, but that would be bad. That might get me punched by an author. The next one is also really big. It is definitely meant to immerse you, although the author would disagree with that. This is Colleen McCullough's The First Man in Rome. This is the first book in her series about ancient Rome. This book concentrates on the Roman general Marius, who was the first real hammer blow to the incredibly sturdy, incredibly healthy edifice of the Roman Republic. The thumbnail description that you get in bad histories is that the Roman Republic was tottering, that it was weak and enervated, that it was due to fall. No, it took a series of men who cared about nothing but themselves, intentionally trying to destroy it in order to destroy it. And they did, as will happen with any healthy republic. If a series of men intentionally try to do that and are not stopped, they will succeed in destroying a healthy republic. The healthy republic itself is the product of thousands of men. But no, it takes, in Rome's case, 3, maybe in some other healthy republics only 1, completely self-absorbed, self-interested man saying, what can I get out of this? Let it all fall to hell. What can I get of it as while the things are falling? Marius was the first of those people for ancient Rome, and the First Man in Rome is all about him, but he is definitely not viewed as a villain in this book. And this was the earliest that Colleen McCullough could set a Roman historical novel where she could have a thread of who she knows is going to be her main character, which is Gaius Julius Caesar. This is about as early as she can go with his family before it becomes, the uncle of an uncle of an uncle. And it's stodgy. That blurb on the account, fiction at its best by Time Magazine. I don't know what that person was drinking at lunch, but it isn't fiction at its best. But it is involving. Then we have something that was bound to be on this list. It is the Napoleonic era. It is Horatio Hornblower by C.S. Forster. And Horatio Hornblower is a naval officer in the fight against Napoleon. We follow him in a series of novels through his career. Again, I apologize for the cover. At first glance, you don't know what's going on that cover. It's so poorly done. But once you start to make out human figures, you see that the star of this novel is a woman. That isn't true. The star of the novel is that guy creeping around in the background. But as far as I know, this is the most recent cover dress for the Hornblower novels. Utterly ugly. But I wasn't about to go hunting around. The Beat to Quarters is an early adventure of Hornblower's. You can follow him at any period in his career. But this is terrific. It's a little bit stodgier than you might be expecting. And Hornblower is definitely not an identifiable hero. He is the hero of the story, but you don't like him. He's not evil. He's pure good, but you don't like him. You can't warm to him at all. But still, thrilling to read. Then we have something by Susanna Dunn. I've recommended this book many, many times. This is The Sixth Wife, a slim historical novel set in the Tudor era. This is all about Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's last wife, the one who outlived him, and who had a tempestuous life of her own. Very interesting figure on her own, unlike some of Henry's wives. She was a very interesting figure on her own, dedicated to the reform of the church, in love with a member of Henry's cabinet, who she went on to marry when Henry was dead. The first woman to publish a book in English under her own name. A fascinating figure. An odd choice for Henry. I think the typical thumbnail description of why Henry chose her is that he had a feeling she would be a good mother for his children and wanted that. He was old enough to want that at that point. That might be true. It's certainly, from every indication that we have, turned out to be true. But this is just terrific. And it touches on another debate about historical fiction that we've had many times, about the choice that a historical novelist has to make. Do you want your book to be reserved and sound like an ancient thing in ye olden times, or do you want it to sound modern? And Susanna Dunn chooses to sound modern. It's still wonderful. Then we have something by James Goldman. This was on my earlier list. He is the author of the play The Lion in Winter, which was made into my very favorite movie of all time. And this is a novel of his called Myself as Witness. The Lion in Winter is about King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, a gigantically powerful couple in the 1180s. And Myself as Witness is about their youngest and least successful son, King John, who was eventually coerced to sign Magna Carta, to stamp his approval on Magna Carta. This is a story of King John's reign, told through the eyes of my guy, Gerald of Wales. And it's done in a very rapid-fire narrative form. It's Gerald of Wales writing down journal entries whenever he gets a chance. He's old and very tired, and he's being overworked by John. So sometimes those entries are very short, sometimes they're longer. They're all impressionistic. Amazing. Just totally gripping as a reading experience. Then we have Stephen Marlowe. This is his book, The Memoirs of Christopher Columbus. A big, fat novel that managed to have its tongue in its cheek the whole time, which is hard to do. It is hard to sustain humorous writing. This is the story of Columbus. It is in every detail. This novel was researched to a fare thee well. But it's told in a very knowing tone that will keep you floating along. Then we have something by Howard Wiseman. This is what I was talking about. This is my one little fudge. King Arthur, in the sense that we romanticize the figure, that did not exist. The Round Table, Excalibur, Merlin, the knights and all, that did not exist. But Arthur, as a historical figure, along the way somewhere had to exist as a resistance fighter against the Romans, as maybe a rallying figure when the Romans leave. This is Then Arthur Fought, an indie published novel that is one of the best pieces of Arthurian fiction of that real Arthur, of the historical Arthur that I've ever read. I don't know how easy this is to find. I don't know how easy the Andrew Levkoff is to find, but you should find it if you can, because it's worth it. If you're interested in Arthurian fiction, it's worth it. Then this next book, along the same lines, where the author is intentionally imitating the annals and chronicles of the time in order to tell a story through a more or less modern lens. This is the great Evan Connell, and this is his book Deus Lo Volt, which is a chronicle of the Crusades, written as a chronicle of the Crusades, and so effectively that in used bookstores all over the Northeast, I have often seen this filed in history. And it brings the Crusades to life. I mean, some of the really best histories of the Crusades also bring it to life. Runciman, if you read Runciman, you're not gonna stop reading him. But this has the extra license of fiction, where Connell can make anything happen. Then we have another book that was on my old list. This is by Hannah Kent. This is a slim novel called Burial Rites, about the last woman to be executed for murder in Iceland. She's been tried and found guilty, and before everything happens, before her sentence is carried out, she's sent to a remote farm. And this is the awkward time where she is there with this family. And, family is life. She is a living dead person. The dawns, the beautiful weather, the sense of becoming useful to the family, all of that bespeaks living, and she is a dead person. So it's terrific. It's a cold book, very much so, no pun intended. Again, I don't know what we're doing with the covers. I'm just going to persevere, and I guess so are you. This is Thomas Berger, and this is his book Little Big Man. Historical novel about a young man who's a young white man who is kidnapped by Indians. He's raised by them. He watches all sorts of raids that they do on white people. He also lives as a white person. He develops all sorts of gigantic angers towards his own adopted people and also towards the white people that he meets, including one of the main cruxes of hatred that he has is George Armstrong Custer, and there I agree completely. And he is actually present at the Battle of Little Bighorn. It's the ultimate Shaggy Dog story of one person living through history, but it's so well done. I'm sorry that Berger is not remembered. I really am. He ought to be remembered at least for this book, and also he wrote a work of fiction about King Arthur that I'm leaving off this list because it's a little more fantastical than Arthur Fought. So I thought I'd leave it off. But Little Big Man, I want Berger to be on this list, and Little Big Man is terrific. Oh, just terrific. Then we have a big, sprawling historical novel whose goal is clearly to immerse you. This novel is now infamous on book 2, thanks to Christopher Russell and his immortal takedown of it, his immortal cri de coeur, how awful it is. This is Irving Stone's novel, The Agony and the Ecstasy. A big, sprawling novel about the life of Michelangelo. From his youth with his penny-pinching father, through his various stages of apprenticeship, to the creation of his masterpieces, including for Pope Julius II, who's really, Julius II himself, just as an aside, is really due for the Crassus or Thomas Cromwell treatment of this bringing a conflicting figure to life in a more nuanced way. And this novel is very immersive. It has legions and legions, generations of fans for a reason. Now, in BookTube terms, whenever you see a copy of this book at a used bookstore, you are all going to do what I did. You are all immediately going to think of Christopher Russell's video. There's nothing I can do about that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Well, that's what this platform is all about. If you read a book that everybody loves and you hate it, make a long video saying how awful it is. That's wonderful. That's what he did. But nevertheless, gently, he's wrong. This is actually a wonderful reading experience. Then we have another Roman historical fiction. This is Ernest K. Gann, who you will a lot. If you know that name, you probably know him for a work of nonfiction. Fate is the Hunter, about flying, about aviation. But this is his book, The Antagonist, which is about the siege of Masada, a mountaintop fortress built by King Herod, filled with water cisterns, deep water cisterns and private gardens, and accessible only by a narrow goat path, so that if you were to sequester a group of people up there, they could withstand anything. The thinking was that they could withstand anything, any kind of siege, because it's just impossible. It faces you on one side with a massive granite wall, and on the other side with the Dead Sea. And this is the novel about the events that are chronicled in Josephus, where the Romans actually do hunt down the Jews that have quartered on the top of Masada and try to take it. They lay siege to it, move a mountain to get there. And this was made into a miniseries that I absolutely adore. But the book is wonderful too. Ernest K. Gann can be a sleepy writer. He wrote a lot of stuff that was very sleepy prose, including the sequel to this. But this book is not sleepy. It's very good historical fiction. Then this next one, again, it's the first book in a series. It is an ask, just like the Richard Sharp novels are. They go on forever and ever. I don't think you'll regret it. And like the Sharp novels, this is also set in the Napoleonic era. This is the Aubrey and Maturin novels of Patrick O'Brian, the first one being Master and Commander. These are set on sea. In that sense, they are very much like the Hornblower novels. These are the stories of Captain Jack Aubrey and his best friend and ship's surgeon, Stephen Maturin, as they have various adventures. The novels are only thinly connected to each other, although they do build on each other in a way that makes it really advisable to start with the first one, Master and Commander. And much like The Wake, there is a ton of vocabulary in these books that is not explained to you. No glossary. No, nothing like that. There's a diagram of a ship for the parts of the ship, but there's no glossary of anything else. This is set in the patois and in the lingo of the Napoleonic era. So there's a bit of a learning curve, but it's worth it. Oh my God, is it worth it? I am sure that you have heard these books praised ecstatically, and that's correct. It's just, there's a little bit of a price of entry. You have to figure things out. And O'Brian knows that, and he does a really good job of helping you. Mainly because Stephen Maturin doesn't know anything about that seagoing world either. And so you're learning right along with him. You're learning faster than he is, because by book 12, he still doesn't know anything about anything. And is guaranteed that if he comes anywhere near even a 2-inch puddle, he's going to fall in it. Anyway, this next one is, again, the cover. I could not find a cover, so I found a cover of a thing that isn't even the thing I'm looking for. Anyway, the book I'm talking about here is Ben-Hur by Lew Wallace. I believe this is an updated version by a descendant of his, and the cover is from the crappy modern movie. Can you imagine having the gall to do a movie of Ben-Hur after Charlton Heston? Can you imagine? I can't imagine, and yet it happened. Anyway, this is the story of a Roman Jew named Ben-Hur, who is he's a well-born family. He is friends with highborn Romans. They dress well. They go to all the right banquets and everything, but things fall out between him and his Roman friend, and between him and the Romans. And Ben-Hur is sent on a horrific journey of degradation, and has to claw his way back to revenge. It's an old book. It was written by a veteran of the U.S. Civil War. It creaks, especially with its treacly Christianity, but it's still terrific. It's still terrific. There's enough in it that's terrific to warrant it being on this list. Then we have something that is completely forgotten. Robert de Maria, the only time I've ever mentioned, that you've ever heard mention of this book, I'm sure, is on this channel. This is his novel Clodia, about Clodia Pulcher, the sister of a Roman politician and rabble-rouser named Clodius, and also the object of amour of the Roman poet Catullus. And this is the fictionalized story of her life. It's a Roman historical fiction set in the tumult that would usher in the end of the Republican era. It's amazingly good, just amazingly good. Makes me wish I could find the rest of what Robert de Maria wrote, or even an ebook of this thing. It's amazingly good. I almost never see it. In my entire time hunting for it, I found 2 copies, both paperbacks, never a hardcover. I was naturally thinking of it because Douglas Boyne just recently wrote a biography, an actual work of nonfiction about Clodia. As I was thinking of this book, because this book has a whole lot more of Clodia in it than that biography does. But it's amazing. If you ever see it at like a used bookstore that has lots and lots of musty old mass market paperbacks, a lot of those will not be good, and they will look a lot like this. This one is really good. Don't miss it. Then we have a book that once upon a time was immensely popular, totally gone now. It's The Cloister and the Hearth by Charles Reade, which has everything in it. It has all of the ideological ferment that I was talking about with Q. It has all of the immersion factor that I was talking about with The Court of the Lion. You are definitely immersed in the late Middle Ages, the dawn of the modern era. It has a plot, a forbidden love affair between 2 people in holy orders. It has adventure, including a giant cat on the rampage. It has all the elements that you would want in pot-boiling, sudsy, totally earnest historical fiction. But it caught the fancy of the world for a while and then went away. It even has a payoff, an unspoken offstage payoff, much like novels set in Pompeii often have this payoff that is hovering over the whole novel, which is that the 2 main characters in this book are the parents of a rather famous Dutch humanist. It's just delightful. It's just delightful. Somebody, maybe not the New York Review of Books, can't we have a really nice illustrated hardcover or a Penguin Classic? But even them, somebody should reprint this with illustrations, because this version that I found is the one that I have, and it has color illustrations that are wonderful. Then we have, sorry about the cover, no idea what's going on here. This is John Hershey. This is book The Conspiracy. This is another Roman historical novel. You'd never know it from this cover, but this is a conspiracy, the conspiracy to assassinate Julius Caesar. Oh no, to assassinate Nero. And it's full of the individual lives of the people involved, the conspirators involved. It reminds me a lot of a historical novel that didn't make the list called Pertinax, which is also about the assassination of a Roman emperor. That one is a little bit bad. It's a little bit boring and stiff, whereas this one, Hersey's great. So, I mean, he's well known for one work of nonfiction, but his fiction is really, really good. All of it is. Then we have, oh God, this cover. This is Taylor Caldwell. This has been on my list before. This is Dear and Glorious Physician. A novel about AI. Oh, no, wait. No, it's a novel about St. Luke, the author of the Gospel according to St. Luke and also the Acts of the Apostles, who church mythology was a doctor. Now, this also is pressing close to the edge of my parameters, like King Arthur, because this person did not exist. As church mythology has it, this person, there is no historical reason to believe any of that church mythology. All of it is meant to enhance a faith in a god, in gods. So there's no historical documentation here. This is just Taylor Caldwell elaborating on a what if. What if there were a first century physician who took it upon himself to collect and write the story of this Judean wonder worker. whether or not, I mean, this pushes the boundaries, but nevertheless, it's wonderful, as I couldn't leave it off, and anybody would call this historical fiction. It isn't. It's just theological fiction, but I don't want to make an argument this late in the video. And then we get to Hermann Broch, and this is an English language translation of his book, The Death of Virgil, the Roman poet Virgil. This is a big hallucinatory thing that is not standard Thomas Mann prose at all. It's beautiful. It's beautifully done. Even in this covers from a big English language translation trade paperback that I don't know is in print anymore, and I don't think anyone else has taken a whack at this. But it is surreal. It is brilliant. It's not just about the death of Virgil. It's about so much else. Oh my. It's a whole era of Roman history and also modern history, very candidly refracted in these pages. Just wonderful. Then we have, this is Miko Waltari. This is the Egyptian. Miko Waltari wrote a whole bunch of historical fiction, including one called The Roman. But this is, I think, his most famous book. And certainly an English language translation. I think this is his most famous book. And another really good look at ancient Egypt. I would have had a lot more ancient Egypt books on this list if it weren't for my own rule that they can't be dual timeline things. Most of the most effective ancient Egypt historical fiction that I've read is modern day characters looking back at ancient Egypt. I don't want to do that. So I included this instead. A little bit creaky. Waltari is really due for an enterprising new translator. Very much so. At least this book, if not the Roman and the Etruscan and whatnot. At least this one. But still really, really good. Full of shot and incident. Oh, shot and incident. Oh my God. Well, that applies to this next one. This is George Garrett, who is out of print. He really, really doesn't deserve to be. Relaxed and in his cups, perhaps over wine and calzones, he would have said, it comes for us all. And maybe someone would have said, so you don't mind? And he just went, no author wants to die. And this author did, and he shouldn't. He shouldn't be dead. This is his book, Entered from the Sun. And this is his novel about Christopher Marlowe. You wouldn't really know it at first when you're first reading the book because Marlowe seems like an off-stage character. Unlike, for instance, A Dead Man in Deptford by Anthony Burgess, where he's front and center. But oh boy, is it about Marlowe. It's also about our main character, who is very much his own person. He is very much not Christopher Marlowe, and who has one of the most satisfying ending scenes in any work of historical fiction. But Marlowe, this is still about Marlowe and the tumult of Marlowe. It's not a long book. The other historical fictions that George Garrett wrote are long. This one is not long. It's well worth your time if you can ever find a copy. It really is. He is just in general well worth your time. Oh, all right. Well, this next one's not long. This next one is famous for being... This next one's not short. It's famous for being long. This is The Far Pavilions by MMK. An immense, sprawling example of historical fiction meant to immerse you. This is not The Court of the Lion. This has a definite plot that will grip you quite a bit. But this is definitely meant to immerse you. It's exotic and incredibly detailed, incredibly textured. I don't know many people who know this novel now. A generation ago, there were a lot of readers who knew this novel. They had favorite characters, favorite subplots. I don't know that that's true anymore, and I don't know that anybody ever watches the miniseries that was made. So I guess I'm not sure that the book is in print, but it's worth it. It's a big undertaking of your time if you want to read it, but it's worth it if you do. Because boy, oh boy, is there a story here. All right. What's the matter, baby? What's up, little one? Oh, he's the baby. Huh? Do you want to go to your chair? Do you want to come over here? Oh goodness. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, do you want to go over there? You can do it. There you go. This next one is also very long, another 1,000-pager. It's not in print. I don't think it will ever be brought back into print. I would love it. A big new floppy trade paperback came out of this because it is so good. This is by Marilyn Durham, who wrote a shorter contemporary or more contemporary novel called The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing that was made into a movie, I believe. This is her book, Flambard's Confession. And it's about William Rufus, the son and heir of William the Conqueror.
I like to say sometimes that every British monarch deserves a great novel, and they can't all be written by Jean Plady. But this would certainly be Flambard. That was his nickname, was Flamebeard. This would certainly be William Rufus's novel, and it's amazingly good, gigantic and textured, leading you to a preordained end. But much like Myself as Witness, this is largely, also in an odd way, The Wake. This is largely about the aftermath of recognized greatness. This is a book in the aftermath of The Conqueror. Terrific. Hard to find. I don't currently have a physical copy, but terrific. Then we have George MacDonald Fraser. You knew he was going to be on this list, and you knew why. This is Flashman, the first book in his Flashman series. This is a series of historical novels set in the Victorian era, starring a character called Flashman. And they're, in all respects, pretty much the same as the Sharpe novels. No, they're not. No, they're not. Richard Sharpe is a hero. Flashy is not a hero. He is a thorough non-hero. He's not even an anti-hero. He's just a non-hero. He is a scoundrel, a coward, a liar, a womanizer, a thief, a lout. He's everything wrong. And every time you hear that about a character in fiction, you are just expecting that in the very last minute, when the cavalry mounts the hill and the woman needs saving, that the hero will suddenly change. At the last minute, you'll see that you are right to believe in him, and that never happens with Flashman. Never. That never happens with Flashman. These are hilarious. They're amazingly good. I recommend the whole series. Okay, then this next one will be a little bit odd. It will not appear on any list like this, but it's on mine. This is by Rachel Beanland. I believe this is her debut novel. And this is Florence Adler, Swims Forever. A novel that takes place in the early decades of the 20th century, where Florence Adler, an independent-minded young woman, has decided that she wants to break records by swimming the English Channel. So off the coast of New York, she decides, the family goes to Coney Island and whatnot all the time for vacations, for summer, for fun, for the crowds, and also because they live there. She decides that she will practice swim there to train herself for swimming the English Channel. And one day, early on in the novel, she does not come back. And her family decides initially for the safety of shielding the sensibilities of the younger members of the family, not to tell them. When they wonder where she is, they say she's swimming. She's out swimming. And so it's not conventional historical fiction. It is very much trying to do a pointed story rather than immerse you. There's nothing immersive about this book, no pun intended. But it's so touching, and it is historical, that I wanted to include it. In case you missed it, I think you would really like it. Then we have an enormous historical novel that is very much meant to immerse you in the stews of London. It's meant to immerse you and maybe arouse you. This is Kathleen Winsor's justifiably immortal book, Forever Amber. You have to get into the swing of this. This is Restoration London fiction. You have to get into the swing of it. You have to get into the nature of the story that Kathleen Winsor is telling here. Again, we can disregard all modern forwards. Barbara Taylor Bradford is very much not in the swing of this book, although, oddly enough, ironically enough, she mimics a lot of that swing in her own novels. Her forward to this edition of this book, you don't want it anyway, because this edition is a big fat trade paperback where the cover will pop off from the text block in about 5 minutes. So you want to find a more durable version of this book, but you definitely want to read it. You definitely want to make the acquaintance of the main character and also all the historical people that she stumbles across, maybe in the dark, including my beloved Samuel Pepys. Terrific. Just terrific. An oddity, an older kind of telling a big historical novel, but I think you're going to love it. I think you will fall under its spell. Then we come to a historical novel set in ancient Greece. This thing is phenomenally popular. It has a diehard legion of fans, including the U.S. military. There's a copy of this book in every U.S. military base in the world. This is Stephen Pressfield's novel, Gates of Fire, about the defense of Thermopylae. King Leonidas and his doomed band of men that was immortalized in 300 by Zack Snyder, from a graphic novel by Frank Miller. This is, of course, a much more historically accurate version of that story. that story's still killer. No matter how many extra men Leonidas had, you're still a killer of a story. And Pressfield is great. I actually love his later novels, the ones he wrote after this. But this book deserves its immortality. I'm sure he knows that he will be remembered for this book. And it is amazingly good. Amazingly good. So, even if you don't think you want to read historical fiction that's military, there are quite a few examples on this list. They're all worth it. Then we have Linnea Hartsucker. This is the first in the series. I recommend the whole series. This is The Half-Drowned King. It's a Viking trilogy. And like so many Viking sagas, at the heart of this story is a young man who is wrongfully deprived of his patrimony and has to fight to get it back against a legion of enemies who seem to have overwhelming advantage. There's nothing wrong with that device, which is why so many Norse sagas use it. And that's why there's nothing wrong with using it for a novel either. And boy, oh boy, are these well done. I say are in the plural because you should read all three of them. But read The Half-Drowned King, and I bet that you won't need my urging to read the other two. Then we have a work of historical fiction. It is itself now an object of history. Nevertheless, it was historical fiction when it was written, and it's terrific, even in English. This is, this Oxford Road Classic has it as Notre Dame de Paris, but this is The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. And it is set in medieval times. Hugo didn't write it. He wasn't in those times. He wrote a parable, a little loving parable in those times. There is Djali the goat. To dramatize a doomed love and the tyranny of the church, and it's amazing. It's amazingly tightly plotted. There isn't a single element, not one little hair on the head of any character that isn't fully and satisfyingly accounted for in the conclusion of this book. Heartbreaking conclusion. This is an incredibly sad book, but nevertheless, it's so wonderfully done. This Oxford thing is translated by Alban Krailsheimer, and there have been many other translations. I don't think you could go wrong with one of them. We come back to his Roman historical fiction for what is arguably, after Ben-Hur, the most famous example, and that is I, Claudius, by Robert Graves. This has a sequel, Claudius the God, which I've warned you about. There are large parts of Claudius the God that are really good. There are large parts of it where Robert Graves just decides to be freakish. It's a thing you have to watch for with this author. He will decide to be freakish. If you like him, you'll follow him through all of it. He's never freakish in his poetry. If you find a collected poems of Robert Graves, grab it right away, because you'll love all of it, and he's never freakish there, because he had editors looking over his shoulder there. But I, Claudius is a tightly told story about the life of Claudius Nero Germanicus, all the names that he has, a stammering young man who accidentally becomes emperor of Rome. And his family, the Claudian family that ruled Rome for a whole generation. So all those characters are in here. There's Germanicus and Livia and Augustus and whatnot. And this book is tightly controlled and builds to a climax, which is Claudius becoming emperor. Claudius the God is not tightly controlled. It is full of authorial whimsies that you just couldn't say no to. And that's the risk you run with this author. He can write a tightly controlled book like, for instance, Hercules, My Shipmate, and then he can write a piece of raving, uncommitted lunacy like The White Goddess. And they can be side by side. He can be write the one, finish it, send it off, and then start writing the other. So you have to be careful. But you don't have to be careful with Claudius. Claudius the God, you have to be careful. But with Claudius the God, in the parts of it that are dedicated to the Emperor Claudius, are wonderful. I find that having started with the best of intentions, I've killed 17 men. But you don't have to worry about that in I, Claudius. It's just all concentrated and all really, really good. Then another book from my earlier list. This is David Malouf. He and I don't often get along. I'm, as far as I know, one of the only persons who've ever given him just a simple pan of a novel. He's revered. So critics usually take the tack of he's so important that if his new novel fails, it fails in the context of importance. And so I can't call it a failure. Not completely. And I have done that, but not this book. An Imaginary Life is all about Ovid, the Roman poet Ovid, who is sentenced to Tomus on the shores of the Black Sea on the other end of the world from the Roman Empire for a crime that we don't know, but it broke Ovid's heart. He continued to write. He wrote long letters back home and also poems, but he was never recalled to Rome. So he lived out the rest of his life in exile. And this book is about his life there. And it's wonderful. Not long, but it's wonderful. There is another really good evocation of Ovid in fiction simply called Ovid by David Wishart. But I didn't include that on this list because the MacGuffin there is that it's a murder mystery. It's about a famous writer who was banished, and why was he banished, and what did he do to deserve it. But it could just as well be Hemingway. So I didn't include that, even though it's really good. There are a lot of things that I didn't include because of my original guidelines that are still really good. The Eye of Horus, for instance, is a terrific ancient Egypt novel. It's a dual timeline novel, so I excluded it. Anyway, this next one is Big, Ian Pears, An Instance of the Finger Post. A novel set in 4 parts. All 4 parts are narrated by a different person from a completely different narrative viewpoint, all talking about the same sequence of events. So you have to piece together what's real and what's not. How this character might be believable on this subject, but he's definitely not on that. She might be believable on this subject, but definitely not on that. So you have to figure out, you have to finger post your way to the right version of what this story is, which means that even though this is a really long book, you're going to be deeply engrossed in it the whole time. So I definitely wanted to include it. Then we have a much shorter novel on a historical event that is even shorter than that, a historical event that took 15 minutes. This is Mary Doria Russell's novel, Epitaph, her novel of the gunfight at the OK Corral between the Earps and the Clantons. That is this big mythic thing in the stories of the ancient West, but it didn't last long. Actually, when you think about it, the Custer's Last Stand at Little Bighorn also didn't last long. The eyewitnesses, the surviving eyewitnesses said, the Native American eyewitnesses says it took about as long as it would take from start to finish, from first gunshot all the way to the end. Took about as long as it would take a man to eat his lunch when he's in a hurry. Same thing with OK Corral. It would have been over before you knew what was happening, and it grew in the mythology. It grew in the retelling. And this is a marvelously told thing. Just here is one of the examples on this list. There haven't been as many as I would wish, but this is one of the examples on this list where the main recommendation of this book is the gorgeous prose. And also the fact that you can read it in one sitting. Then we have another Mary Renault novel. Again, apologies for the cover. This is Fire from Heaven. This is her novel about the boyhood of Alexander the Great. Can be read completely alone, completely separate from any other Alexander stuff that she wrote. Still touching, still wonderful, still largely the story of a boy who seems epicene fighting with his father. That is still the most telling element of this. Let's see here. Let's move on to a gigantic doorstop that I think is out of print. Terrible shame. This is The Lion of Ireland by Morgan Llewellyn. Morgan Llewellyn is a wonderful, wonderful person, wonderful to chat with, and this is her gigantic novel about Brian Boru and ancient Ireland. This is the cover to the old mass market paperback that I really wish I could find. I don't have a copy of this. I don't have a physical copy of this at all. And any of you have ever read this author, whether she's writing about the 20th century or whether she's writing about mytho-history, she wrote about Brian Boru, who is a historical character, but she also wrote about Finn MacCool, who's not a historical character. He's mythical in the same quasi-historical way as King Arthur. No matter what she's writing about, the Easter Uprising, she's always great. This is just long. This is the longest thing she ever wrote. And boy, oh boy, you won't want it to stop. Then we have another classic. This is Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Set in the olden times of King Richard and Robin Hood and whatnot. A terrific, if slightly musty novel. Walter Scott is a slightly musty author. If it's any consolation to you, those of you reading his works, whether it's Ivanhoe or Kenilworth or anything else now, and thinking, okay, I get the sense that I want to like this author, but his prose is a little musty. If it's any consolation to you, when he was writing these books, his original readers were saying, this is a little musty. Still tremendously evocative. And with a killer of a love story. Then we have a big historical novel I've recommended a million times before. This is The Journeyer by Gary Jennings. This is his huge novel about Marco Polo, traveling with his uncles to the Far East, and then staying in the Far East, and staying at the court of the Great Khan, and experiencing a different world, a completely different set of cultural assumptions, and exploring the whole time. This book is really about exploring, including one of its most memorable set pieces in which Marco Polo doesn't even have to travel. But thanks to a little pharmaceutical intervention, he even explores what it's like for a woman to give birth. In a harrowing 5 pages. It will make you send roses to your mother. I guarantee it. Then we have a classic old historical novel that is really good. It is really heartfelt. It's sappy, but it's really heartfelt. This is Catherine by Anya Seton. I think her greatest book. There's one other book that her fans, if she has any left, would say maybe is better than this. But this is the story of the time of Chaucer. This is the time of Catherine is Chaucer, the wife of Chaucer's great patron. This is the story of John of Gaunt and the High Court Kingdom and whatnot of England, and a wonderful portrait of Catherine herself, who was a love match, totally unsuitable love match on both sides. It's a complicated story. It's really well done. She is evoked in fiction better than this in only one place, actually by Chaucer himself. But there, it's not as he said, she said. It's not. There's no atmospherics involved. So you definitely want to read this to get her sense of her. Then we'll do Anthony Burgess. This is his novel, The Kingdom of the Wicked. Basically a straight retelling of Roman historians about the same era, the same people as I, Claudius. A lot of the overlap there, but done in the Burgessian way. Far more witty, far more worldly wise. Robert Graves was trying to write basically a modern Roman chronicle, and Burgess is not trying to do that. So this is much, I imagine for most readers, this will be much more readable. A lot of the anecdotes that he navigates towards in this book are taken, just lifted straight from Suetonius or Tacitus, but it doesn't matter. They're great anecdotes. I mean, he fills a lot of it too. He winds in between that imperial Rome story. He is also winding in the story of the growing Christianity, including St. Paul. So it saves itself that way. It gives itself a jolt of originality that way. We'll go back to a gigantic doorstop when it comes to historical fiction. This is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, a gigantic novel about two old Texas Rangers, retired Texas Rangers, who are leading a cattle drive across half the country. Because a friend of theirs has told them there's great pasture land up there. They don't know anything about it, have any reason to leave their life, except they're bored, so they do that. And you would think, I mean, that's it for a 1,000-page novel. You would think that's not enough, but oh my, you will keep reading this thing. You will. It's amazing. You don't need me to praise Lonesome Dove. It has been praised endlessly on BookTube. It is an amazing novel. It will pull you in. You will start to care about those two Texas Rangers. Then we have something by James Alexander Thom. I couldn't leave him out. He wrote half a dozen really good historical fictions, and his historical fiction is dense. And it feels dense because he is grounding it, like Alan Eckert. He's grounding it in fact, exhaustively, in fact, so that it took him a long time to research any book that he was working on. Not because he knew what dramatic plotline he would get. He knew the dramatic plotline on day one, but because he wanted to make sure that if he was telling a story, and he mentions that it's raining on a Thursday, that it was actually raining on that Thursday. You'd think that would kill the narrative, but it doesn't really. This is his book Long Knife, about George Rogers Clark, who was not the Clark of Lewis and Clark, but almost, and is an amazing figure in American history. Totally forgotten. He isn't a footnote in American historical history textbooks, but he's an amazing figure. Led an amazing life, full of real-life adventures. That's all that this book is. That's all that Long Knife is his adventures. Which read larger than life, but they actually happen. There's nothing in this book that didn't actually happen. There might be one thing. There's one incident in this book that I think was a flight of fancy on the author's part, and I think he even admitted that in a memoir that he wrote. That, like this book, is long out of print. Everything by this author is long out of print, but this is well worth it. All of the stuff that he wrote is, if you like historical fiction. Then we have Burke Boyce. I have championed this book. I am its only living champion still. This is The Man from Mount Vernon, his relatively slim novel about George Washington that is very, very good. It does not venerate Washington. He is just a man with good qualities and bad qualities, who is put at the head of an army. I disagree with Boyce in that Washington very much wanted to be at the head of that army. It was not reluctant. Washington was in love with the whole myth of the reluctant hero, of Cincinnatus called from his plow. But it wasn't true. It wasn't true. He was a silly popinjay. But this novel came closer than anything fiction or nonfiction has ever done to convincing me that he had heroic qualities, so that's something. And this is gripping. It will show you what it was actually like to fight the revolution. in a way that, unfortunately, a lot of even great nonfiction doesn't. Then we have a gigantic work of historical fiction, Tudor historical fiction, once considered the greatest example of Tudor historical fiction, The Man on the Donkey by H.M.S. Prescott. I believe H.M.S. Prescott shows up in this list again. But this is a towering Tudor historical novel about one particular event in the reign of King Henry VIII. So this new cover had a blurb by Hilary Mantel, of course. I think that blurb is ironic now, because I think Hilary Mantel wrote the greatest piece of Tudor historical fiction ever written. But this is still tremendously involving, hugely detailed in a way that a lot of the Tudor historical fiction that's been on this list is not. It doesn't creak as much as you would think. It does creak. Its fans say it doesn't, but it does. I'm a fan of this book. And I don't remember who this reprint volume is, but maybe this means that there is a version that's still in print. That would be great if there were. Then we have another example like we've seen a couple of times now with Crassus and with Cromwell. This is a historical novel that takes a figure who is unmitigatedly evil in history and tries to, if not make him a hero, at least make him three-dimensional. This is Antonio Scarlati's book, M, Son of the Century, translated by Anne Milano Appel. This is the first book. We get a young Mussolini, a journalist, a rabble-rouser, searching for an idea with which he can set the world on fire. So we get lots of other people too. We get lots of other Italian figures that are real. There was one who's a famous one-eyed poet who was an aviator. There's another who was the founder of Futurism. We get all sorts of historical figures in here, but Mussolini dominates the book, and it's fantastic. I know that it's a hard sell if I mention to you that it's a big historical novel about a Mussolini before he became a dictator. You're going to think, no thanks. It's really, really good. No matter what you like to read, you will be caught up in it. Then we have Marguerite Yourcenar. This is an English-language translation of the Memoirs of Hadrian, her trippy, surrealistic, very much in the nature of The Death of Virgil, novel about the Roman Emperor Hadrian and Antinous, a beautiful young man who Hadrian loved. He named towns after him. He had endless statues commissioned for him. There are endless statues of Antinous that Hadrian didn't commission. If you were a talented artist in a town that Hadrian was going to visit, this famously peripatetic emperor, you might spend a month creating a marble statue of Antinous, hoping that it catches Hadrian's eye. So it wasn't just Hadrian making these things happen. We don't know, even now, to what extent that love was reciprocated or even voluntary. We don't know if Hadrian wasn't the mother of all stalkers. We don't know that. Antinous killed himself. That has always struck me as an indication that he didn't want any attentions from this older, horny-handed, scabby-faced older emperor. That he didn't want any of that. I could be wrong, but certainly romantic fiction says that he did want it and that it was the love story of the century. This is still an amazingly gripping book from an author who knew that you could really make a pile if you wrote a historical fiction that caught on. Every author has that temptation. Whether you're, a rabble-rouser like Howard Fast, or whether you're, a jobbing novelist like Robert Graves, or whether you're a professional epicene like Gore Vidal, you all know, thanks to I, Claudius, or for instance, or for that matter, Ben-Hur, you know that if you write the historical novel, the Roman historical novel of your time, it has a chance of going what we would now call mega viral and making you a gigantic pile of money. That if you're Robert Graves, you're then going to spend your whole life trying to hide from the Internal Revenue Service of the UK. But anyway, his next book is a return appearance. This is the return appearance of Eiji Yoshikawa. This is his book Musashi, but famous swordsmith. Every bit as long as Taiko. I think better. I think certainly more accessible, because there's much more of a personal story here. Full of the same kind of epic sweep of action and personal drama as Taiko. An amazing novel. Again, like Taiko, as far as I know, only ever published in the United States in hardcover in a weirdly oversized thing. An oblong block square of a thing that is uncomfortable in the hand, impossible in the bag. I would love it if Yoshikawa were reprinted. Is that a lot to ask? I would love a uniform, gorgeous reprint. Anyway, Musashi is great. Then we have, sorry about the cover, this is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It's a famous story, hardly needs introduction from me, about a Sherlock Holmes pastiche monk in the Middle Ages going to a weird monastery with a bunch of weird inhabitants who are maybe hiding a manuscript. They may be hiding the knowledge of a manuscript, and that knowledge might be driving them insane. It's richly atmospheric, I believe would be the reviewer hackneyed phrase. Terrific book once you get past the initial setup. You have to get past the initial setup and get involved in whether or not you care whether or not things are happening at this monastery. Once you get to that point, which is admittedly, it's a high bar, it's 100 pages in, but once you get there, boy, will you be there. Boy, will you be there. All the way to the totally improbable but wonderful ending. Then we have another appearance by Anthony Burgess. Sorry about the cover. This is his novel, Napoleon Symphony, about Napoleon Bonaparte, told in 4 parts to mimic the Eroica Symphony by Beethoven. Here, Burgess carts in all sorts of Bonaparte family drama, family anecdotes, including a whole bunch of stuff from memoirs where we have no reason to believe it's true. Burgess roamed throughout those memoirs and all the letters and everything, all the accounts, and picked what he liked. He picked the famous stories, but also the good ones. So that this ends up being the great Napoleon novel. Go figure. After all this time, this ends up being the great Napoleon novel. Then we have The Persian Boy by Mary Renault, her great novel about Alexander the Great. It follows up from Fire from Heaven, but it isn't necessary to read Fire from Heaven to read this. I think this device is actually running out of power. We've been going so long. Let me plug it in so that the worst doesn't happen. You don't need to read The Fire from Heaven to read and love this book. This is a novel I've talked about several times on this channel lately. Story about Alexander's conquest, told from the point of view of Alexander's little bed warmer. But that doesn't cheapen it at all. You'd think it would, but it doesn't. And then a huge book. This needs no introduction whatsoever. This is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. The story of a cathedral slowly being built in the Middle Ages. This has a great backstory. This novel has a great backstory. But I think the heart of it is that when you are touring the great cathedrals of England, now, in the 21st century, you're going to look at them and think, what an amazing building. And it's going to take a minute for you to remember that it was built with no modern machinery at all. In which case, your admiration for these things and the glory of them goes up an order of magnitude. I think that kind of thing, the human stories behind getting these things built, is in large part governing the dramatic motor of this book. There is a MacGuffin about a murder, but I think that is the main emphasis of this thing, is that in the backdrop of the lives of all of these characters, something incredible is slowly growing towards heaven. Which makes it, to me, all the more effective that the book's sequel, in the sequel to The Pillars of the Earth, which I actually like more, I know that's heresy, in the sequel to The Pillars of the Earth, you have a normal backdrop. The cathedral is actually there in the background now, and something in the background is slowly tearing everything down. The Black Death is slowly growing in the background. I think that's a very neat juxtaposition of the two. But The Pillars of the Earth Ken Follett went to bat to write this thing, so well worth reading. Then we have another book with Pompeii in the background, with Pompeii as the setting. But unlike The Wolf's Den by Elodie Harper, this is Pompeii by Robert Harris, and this is very much in the vein of usual Pompeii fiction, where you know what's coming. You know what the climax of the book is. None of the characters do, but you do. And that's what happens here. It's amazingly done. Amazingly. Because the main character involved is a hydrologist from Rome. He's a waterman from Rome, who's been sent from Rome, from the regional government center of Rome, to find out why the aqueducts have failed in the area of Naples, of the Bay of Naples. Why is the water system suddenly failing? Hence, you have the crack on the cover there. So he comes the closest that any first century Roman character could to kind of sort of guessing by the end what's going on and what might be coming. He has to figure out what's going on, why the water supply has stopped. And you, as a modern reader, know that volcanic eruptions, whether it's Vesuvius or Mount St. Helens, are preceded by earthquakes, lots of them. So it makes sense that buried pipes and cistern walls would crack, and that this would be one of the earliest warning signs. It's terrific. Just terrific. Oh my, right up to the ending. Oh my God, the ending. The ending is what you expect. But by the time the ending comes, there are two characters you're hoping will survive. It's not an easy thing to survive the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Then we have another great Roman historical novel. Rome has been the focus for a lot of historical fiction over the last 3 centuries. That's why it's so predominant on this list. This is Heinrich Sienkiewicz. This is his book Quo Vadis, about Marcus Vinicius, about him, falling in love in a Rome where something is taking place in Rome slowly. You becoming harder and harder to go a day without getting a mention of it on the periphery of your life, and that something is Christianity. So this has a bit of the same Christian treacle as Ben-Hur, but boy, oh boy, is it effective. Boy, oh boy, is it ever. Big, sweeping thing. Then we have Hilda Lewis. This is her historical novel, I Am Mary Tudor. Wish I could have found the cover for the mass market paperback of this. It's memorable, to put it mildly. But this is the story of the figure who's come down to us in history as Bloody Mary. Henry VIII's only legitimate child. Legitimate child who survived with his queen, Catherine of Aragon. Mary led a miserable life, an utterly miserable life, and this is not a miserable book. Hilda Lewis doesn't shy away from all the rotten stuff that happened to this poor young woman, and also all the rotten stuff she did. It's one of only 4 novels about Mary Tudor that I have read. By far the best of them all. By far. Amazingly good book. Hard to find, I would imagine, but amazingly good. Then we have Peter Green's novel, The Sword of Pleasure. This is... it's difficult. This is not the cover that I read this with. It's difficult to describe really what this. It's an ancient Roman historical novel. It is very much about 2 particular figures in Roman history. It's impossible to find. It's well worth it. It is. We should probably skip this one because it's difficult to describe. There's a lot. Peter Green went on to become a famous classicist, and I'm a little bit conflicted in even talking about this book, but is there a way that I can thread the needle? It's a scholarly, acute book. No, there's no way to do it. If you ever see this Old Penguin or the Old American Mass Market, buy it and give it a try. That's the best I can do. See what you make of it. This next one, far less obscure. The sort of pleasure. What was I thinking? I don't know why I put it on this list, but fortunately we have plenty of leeway on this list. This one is known to you. This will not be the sort of pleasure. This is Shogun by James Clavell, about an Englishman who is washed up on the shores of medieval Japan in the Shogunate era and has to learn the ways of the era quickly or he will die in some gruesome ways. One of the people in the novel early on is gruesomely tortured to death within earshot of our main character. So he has to learn pretty quickly. I've talked about this book many, many times before. I've done a read-along of this book. I've joined in other people's read-alongs of this book. It's long. It is famous. It was adapted for a TV series and then another TV series. It's well worth your time. It's huge, so you might look at it and think, oh, no. No. But it will capture you. It will. I swear it will. Then we have another long historical novel from an author who is largely gone. This is Noah Gordon's book, The Physician. There we have Istanbul in the background again. This is the story of a waif who climbs the greasy pole to heights as a doctor. Doctor here in every air quotes. This East or West, there was no actual medicine in these times. There was no ancient wisdom. There is no wisdom with a capital W. If you are rich enough and spoiled enough and bored enough to think that the ancients with a capital A had medical knowledge that we have somehow lost in our debased era that was in any way effective, well, go ahead and live by that, and I'll give my regards to your survivors. But even so, the main character here, is born in a gutter and is trying, by circumstances and by his own pluck, he is trying to rise to power, much like in Restoration. We're talking about a doctor. It's a very effective novel, more so than anything else that Noah Gordon wrote, I think. Then we have Sarah Schmidt's book, See What I Have Done, an effective novel about the Lizzie Borden killings here in New England, what happened, how it happened, what the miasma of the house was like. I think that it's tremendously effective in every way. You might have a second opinion on that, but well worth your time to try. Those blurbs on the cover don't come from nowhere. A lot of people read this and liked it. Then we will return to Robin Hood type territory, but in a very different way. This is Richard Kluger's book, The Sheriff of Nottingham, and it is about the Sheriff of Nottingham, who is the signature villain in the Robin Hood stories, but here he's not a villain. Here he's the hero. And that doesn't mean that Robin Hood is the villain. King John is the villain. Amazingly, indelibly the villain. But here we get to know the sheriff, and he is a good man, surrounded by bad people and weak people. One of the weak people, one of the grandstanding posturers who's only making things worse for everybody, is Robin Hood, who is not a major character in this book. It's incredible. Just incredible. It's an incredible historical novel. I wish that I could put a copy in the hand of every fan of historical fiction, because it's unlikely they're going to see it in a used bookstore. But if you ever do, in this hardcover, or Penguin once made a trade paperback, grab it. You're going to love it. You're absolutely going to love it. Then we have a gigantic novel. I've recommended this thing before. It's a little bit of an ask. This is John Barth's novel, The Sotweed Factor. It's very much a stylistic gambit on John Barth's part. Also, it's a rebellion on his part against a lot of the loosey-goosey stuff that was happening, narratively speaking, in fiction as a result of the long aftershadow of the beats. So this book is the apotheosis of plot. This is one thing after another. There is almost none of the kind of poetic flights of fancy that were afflicting even some of his respected peers. It's a story set centuries ago about an English poet who comes to the New World and is thoroughly debauched. It's wonderful. Difficult to synopsize, but wonderful. It's a head trip of a book, I believe used to be the term, but well worth it. Then the aforementioned Howard Fast. This is Spartacus, his great novel made into an even more famous movie about one of the slave rebellions that took place in ancient Rome, in the Republican era of ancient Rome. This one led by a Thracian gladiator called Spartacus. We have no idea what his real name was. We have no idea really if he came from Thrace or anything about him. But he became an almost mythical figure leading this great slave rebellion that was serious. I mean, it beat back a lot of the trivial attempts that were at first made to curtail it, until the senators and the people back in Rome realized this is serious. We need to send serious serious military opposition to this thing. We've trained these fighters to be merciless killers, and somewhere along the line in the Spartacan revolt, they got help from people who also trained Roman soldiers. So this is not trivial anymore. Not only because they're hard to beat in the field, but also because it's a slave rebellion. This took too long to dawn on the powers that be back in Rome, one of whom was the aforementioned Crassus, that it's not just that these people are difficult to beat militarily, it's that they're all slaves. And who's preparing your food? And who is tucking you in at night? And who is guarding your door? Slaves are. And this could touch off a much bigger thing, in other words, is what a lot of people thought. So very, very good book. Oh my. Doesn't lose its luster at all. Then we have a novel, I think this was his debut, by Stephen O'Connor. This is Thomas Jefferson Dreams of Sally Hemings. This is a novel about Thomas Jefferson, the slave owner, and Sally Hemings, the slave he repeatedly raped. I know that you will read stories of the love between them. You will read that in this book as well. You will read about the love relationship between them. That is not possible between a man and property. You want to talk to me about the love of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, talk to me about an alternate reality in which he sets her free and gives her an income. That didn't happen. So there's a large chunk of this book that I fundamentally don't agree with. But it is beautifully done. It also pushes the boundaries just a little of my original boundaries set at the beginning of this video 8 hours ago about what we're going to count for historical fiction. This is messing around a lot with modern sensibilities and even the modern world. And it feels a little bit unfair because for that exact reason, I left out God Knows by Joseph Heller. But I wanted to include this because enough of it is just drawn from the history of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Heming in two continents that I had to include it. And it is really, really good. Then another, I mentioned The Hunchback of Notre Dame, we'll do another historical piece, another famous piece of historical fiction, The Three Musketeers by Dumas. This was historical in his day. You don't need me to synopsize it for you, but nevertheless, if you've heard about The Three Musketeers, seen movies or whatnot, but never actually read it, it's tremendously fun to read. It's an amazingly good read, even in English. So, and there are like 5 different good English language translations. So give it a try. The story of these swashbuckling soldiers of the king and a scheming cardinal and a scheming Lady de Winter. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. No matter how familiar it is, you're going to love it. Then we'll go back to the Crusades. We'll do a big, sprawling historical novel that goes back to the Crusades. It is wonderful, and it is not by an author whose name you would link with that. It's by Louis L'Amour. The Walking Drum was a big, gigantic historical novel. He wrote a longer book than this, but it was a Western. It was a frontier book. But this book is amazingly good. And it reminds you of how much historical fiction, not Western, but historical fiction is mixed in with his Westerns. The early Sackett novels are very much cut from the same cloth as this book. Not gun-toting, hombres at all. And this is amazing. If you've read any Louis L'Amour, you know he will not let you down. He does not let you down. This has a hero you can root for. It has a love story you're hoping will happen in the end. And it has a MacGuffin that winds its way through the book marvelously effectively. An unusual piece of Louis L'Amour, but well worth it. Then perhaps the most famous piece of historical fiction of them all is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Set during the Napoleonic era, set during Napoleon's march on Moscow. Gigantic cast of characters, a gigantic book, a huge number of narrative gimmicks in this book, narrative viewpoints, including one I predictably like more than others. Cast of characters of all sorts of, everywhere on the philosophical spectrum. 2 love affairs, 2 love stories that they're a little hokey, you will think they're a little overwritten, but you will want to find out what happens. You'll be rooting for them to work out. War and Peace is historical fiction. It's the ultimate book in a lot of people's mind. There are books that are much longer than this, but it's the ultimate book in a lot of people's mind. There are a lot of readers that I know, including really good readers, really serious readers, have spent decades of their lives saying, yeah, sooner or later I'm going to read War and Peace. Or it's not War and Peace, sooner or later I'll get to that. I always wanted to say to those people, I did here for Wine and Calzone, say to a lot of those people, well, why not now? Why not read it now? I strongly recommend it. There are a number of good English translations. Then a book by Christian Cameron. I've recommended this to you before. This is his book, Washington and Caesar. The other example on this list, aside from The Man from Mount Vernon, of George Washington actually captured well in historical fiction. He is often captured poorly, including by Mary Higgins Clark, of all people. He's often just the subject of hagiography, but here he's a real person. This juxtaposes Washington, the slave owner, the slave beater, the slave raper, the slave seller, the slave killer, and the father of his country, the hero of the revolution. It juxtaposes that with a slave named Caesar. Marvelously. Just marvelously. I strongly recommend it. I hope it's still in print. Then another book that was on my earlier list, this is When the War is Over by Stephen Becker. This is... Actually, the appearance of this book on the list is making me wonder if we've touched on The Killer Angels. Maybe I've omitted it. It's a long list. Let's just put those two together right here. When the War is Over is Stephen Becker's American Civil War novel, and The Killer Angels is Michael Shara's American Civil War novel. They're both terrific. The Killer Angels is much better than this book, but this book is still really good. One of the best American Civil War novels I've ever read. So we'll include both of those, even though I don't think I have a picture to show you for The Killer Angels. And then let's finish up the list. I've been nattering on well long enough, haven't I? Let's finish up the list with Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. And here I mean the whole series, but we can start with the first book with its hideous American cover. We're done talking about the covers. This is her story of Thomas Cromwell, the lawyer and leg breaker who Henry VIII used to not only break him apart from his rightful queen, Catherine of Aragon, but also to break him apart from the Church of Rome so he could marry Anne Boleyn. Thomas Cromwell was at the heart of all of those events, and he went on to be at the heart of a lot of other events. And he was a worm, a climber, a backstabber, an evil man. Hated by everyone. But he's the hero for Hilary Mantel. She decides to try and make him a hero, and what a hero she makes him. No matter what you know or think about the historical Cromwell, you will fall in love with her Cromwell. And that is the task and also the glory of great fiction. That it can do that. That is bad biography. But it is great fiction. This is terrific. I know you've heard it universally praised. If you haven't got to it, I have done a read-along of it. I've talked about it endlessly on this channel. I've broken it down endlessly. It is every bit deserving of all the praise that it got from everybody, including both me and Christopher Hitchens, which didn't happen very often. So I'll end with this. I'll end with a very, very strong recommendation for Wolf Hall. So there you go. There are 50 or so, a master list of 50 or so historical fiction for you to chew on. All these are recommends. So that is an elaboration on that earlier video. So I'll wrap this up for now, thank God, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.